All right, my friends, welcome to episode 295 of Prof and Prof Play Games. That's right, the dev is gone. He has been excommunicated. He is somewhere in the wilds of, God, I'm not sure exactly where he is right now. Somewhere in Idaho, maybe. He could be in the belly of a bear. No one knows. So we've got Bill here, my friend from my college. He is a professor of... I will let you introduce yourself. Bill, who are you?
That's fine. Well, thank you, my friend. And yes, welcome back to the second inaugural Prof and Prof Play Games. I made such a startling debut in 2019 that it took you 2 years in desperation to ask me back. I'm very proud of that. So yes, I am a fellow colleague of our Prof here. In addition, I am a gamer. I've been a game reviewer. I've worked in the beta test in some aiding of games, particularly showing my age, things like Mac games, which those were a thing at one time.
I was going to ask, that was a thing? That's good.
I know. Mon ami, it is amazing. But then again, my first, console was a Sears Pong console, so that, dates me as well. But I have done some academic work on video games, and what may be pertinent to our conversation a little later, a colorful lecture called Why Is My Elf Gay? It's Batman's Fault, which was presented at Berkeley now over a decade ago. So that is probably as close to having. Oh, and I did write mods. I guess I had one of the most downloaded mods for Witcher 2.
Do you still do that kind of work?
I mostly just do it for myself. I tweak games because I find them fun. I've considered doing them, but I won't even claim that I'm a really great modder. I mean, normally it's just that a lot of mods involve editing XML files. Mm-hmm. So when I'm in doing game things and I'm wanting to tweak stuff, if other friends are playing and they want those tweaks, I share them with them. I only have, I think, 1 or 2 files up on the Nexus, which is, of course, where most of these things reside. So,
is there something that occurs in video games that you instantly want to mod it out or mod it in because it's missing? Something like
absolutely.
over encumbrance or something like that.
I mean, for example, one of my favorite games of all times is Pathologic, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
I think we talked about that last time, or Anthony
maybe
talked about
it's a really weird Slavic game by Ice Pick Studios. It is a studio that is brilliant people that clearly has many things wrong with them, which is wonderful. And they reissued it. It's now they did an upgrade to the game, but it has a very, how games have cultural sensibilities, mm-hmm. right? And it has a sensibility that likes to put in high amounts of scarcity and time pressure in addition to the storyline. And I'm just not interested in time pressure in that case, because I want to explore this horror universe and not be caught up in, well, I have to redo this day 12 times because I didn't run to this correct angle and through this particular street in time to be able to trigger something, or I have to play the game 7 times just so I can see 3 dialogues that I missed.
Right.
And so things that often involve time pressure, I absolutely detest. Inventory constraints, that annoys me mm-hmm. tremendously.
Yep.
Games that attempt to use mobile clickbaity things that I can excise out. We'll probably talk about that when we're talking about one of the things that we're playing today that has a hesitant recommendation, but there's a lot of fun storyline underneath the game that's intended to try and take your money, and I am happy to avoid the take your money component.
Right. Well, I appreciate you digging into that. While you were doing that, I looked at Pathologic on Steam. Right now, in case anyone wants to jump in, it is on 90% discounts for $1.29. A couple of reviews. One review is no. Another review is the music and atmosphere are superb. Another review is this game sucks, please play it. It really sets up a nuanced discussion about the virtues of child murder.
Yeah, it is a dark, dark game, and the translation originally wasn't good. I actually, and again, to be fair, I did help put in some of the translations for the updated game.
For the one that came out in 2015?
Yeah. Now, I don't know how much they used it. I mean, they credited me somewhere. I know that I got an email about it, but I was really into the game for a period of time. But there was a bit of a problem because they wanted some very direct translations, and I felt like that that the spirit of the translation for the atmosphere they were wanting was probably a little better, rather than trying to do word for word, which in English often became awkward.
Yeah, exactly.
So, for example, in steppe culture, there is a kind of like a village alderman type role, or like mayor, that's called the Boos, Boos, and I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. You would probably know better than I do.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that term, actually.
Yeah, but it's spelled Boos. Now, it is a character who is who is kind of a boss character. And so I explained to them, to a Western audience, that the word boos would just be read by somebody as a misspelling of the word boss in English. Mm-hmm. And that it's not a term that anybody would know, and that the game didn't really help define it very well, and that therefore translating it to boss rather than boos would probably be a smoother translation. But yeah, the Pathologic is a interesting, metaphysical, multi-layered game that's really a lot of fun, but oh man, you have to have a lot of patience for it. It has a lot of weird shit in it. Very surreal.
Steam is telling me that it's very similar to Witcher 3. I suspect that's probably incorrect.
Yeah, having played both, I would say the similarities are scant. I mean, unless in Witcher 3 that you have a floating obelisk of origami that isn't seen as such by anybody else, inhabited by gangs of children, and anyway, it's complicated.
I feel like you're talking about Triss Marigold.
Clearly, yes, it is the sorceress's fault, isn't it always?
Exactly.
So that was a game.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
I was going to say The Witcher was always weird because did you ever? When did you play The Witcher 1? Because I know you're a big fan of Witcher 3.
Oh, I haven't played The Witcher 1. I've only dabbled in Witcher 2. I never even touched 1 yet.
Oh, well, I know this wasn't really on our discussion list, but it is fascinating how when The Witcher 1 came out, it had 2 different translations, and I was getting it on the PC, and there was 2 different English versions. And I originally got the US version, but then I found out they censored parts of the game in America.
Like the sex cards thing, or
the sex cards and titties. Titties were not allowed, apparently. Now, here's the thing. For reasons that will become very clear as this podcast goes on, my interest in memories as a sexual attraction is not high, and so as a result, it wasn't there. But I did kind of want to see what the original vision of the game was,
right?
And so I tracked down a European copy, and that was the one and I played both through in various different levels, and it was very interesting because the English translations was different. And the early translations of that first game, I mean, some of the ways they refer to women in that game, it obviously the property upon which The Witcher is based is kind of very sexist in nature, and that's kind of obvious in how it's written.
Yep.
And not, I mean, obviously in the video game it's been adapted, but it is smoothed out a lot from the first game to the second game to the third game. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for as much as I love Witcher 3, I just haven't gone through the previous ones, and I need to. I keep holding out hope that the Witcher 1 is going to be either remastered or remade in some way, but I'm not sure if that's gonna happen or not.
Yeah, it's hard because the combat was a little clunkier and different, and like any of these, it's hard because when they're sitting on piles of money, and there's piles of money to be made in expanding things. Like I never finished Blood and Wine. I didn't start it. I got to all the other ones. I know that's excellent.
It is really good.
And I know your recommendation is high, but since I know that they're doing a visual fidelity upgrade because of the new thing, I just have decided, well, I'm just not going to I was in another DLC and almost finished with it, and, a kind of a deal with the devil one. I don't remember what the name of it was. And then, but I just decided, well, if the visual fidelity is coming, I'll just kind of pick that up when that occurs. So
yeah, I keep thinking that too for my replay, because I started a replay on PS5 actually, and I was like, why am I doing this now? I will just wait until this train wreck of Cyberpunk is over and they put out The Witcher 3 shit. So as it's clear, this is what the podcast is going to be like. We're going to go off on tangents and talk about shit and have fun. One thing we're not going to do, and something that we do a lot when we're together, is talk about work. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk about games and games only. This episode, we're talking about E3 announcements, anything that kind of struck our fancy that we want to share and talk about with each other. And then we're going to talk about representation in video games. That's kind of our main topic tonight. And then we're going to get into what we've been playing. So why don't we start with you and any E3 announcements that tickled your fancy?
Oh, thank you. Well, and thankfully, since we had a little pre-nup, whichever it was before this conversation, my two that are fascinated, and this will show, again, a little diversity from where you and Anthony usually have your interests. My first big one was amazingly Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, which is now I can't remember. Did I recommend that game to you?
No, because Anthony and I had played it for a book club for our podcast years ago, before I knew that you played games.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I know I went back and listened to your back catalog, but I don't claim that I have memorized your entire.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
So, I know. Well, it's a good thing you weren't forcing work, because otherwise I would have failed the pop quiz. So
that's later in the podcast.
Oh, thanks. Fibber McGee. All right. But yeah, Doki Doki, which is a classic and crazy game, which if people aren't aware, it's a free visual novel. You can still get the free version. It is ostensibly a light dating romance game, but of course it is not, just as in things like Undertale and other things are Pony Island. It's one of those set of meta games that is much more than it appears on its surface. And, there's another one that I've recently downloaded but haven't played, Only Cans.
Only Cans?
Have you not heard of this? Look
No.
this up on Steam.
I'm going to go do that right now
So
while you're
Only
talking.
Cans is obviously a parody of OnlyFans.
Oh, no, you told me about this. And
the idea is that you are a fashion photographer for all of these sexy soda cans. And that it's some kind of photography game. But it also has a tag that says body horror.
Oh,
so
Christ.
It's clearly a little bit more complicated than it appears. And it is interesting, but it's just not one that I've gotten to yet. But I look forward to the
Psychological
Only Cans
horror.
experience.
Holy shit. Okay. Horror. Yep. Whoop. Okay. Yep. That
Yeah, and
sounds
I've tried to
in
avoid
line.
it, but I think even like Matt Pat may have had a brief thumbnail that spoiled one of the things for me about it. But well, it's okay. I mean, game theory is always going to be interesting too. So yeah, Doki Doki Literature Club. It adds 6 new side stories, it says. As we discussed before the podcast, or actually you should probably put in, because since I play mostly PC, you had a really good observation, I think, about console players.
Yeah, I'd hate to spoil it, but there's something special about this particular game that, in my view, is only achievable on PC. So I'm really curious how they're going to handle this on console, and I also want to play it on console so I can platinum this game, because I did really enjoy it. Although Anthony enjoyed it as well, but it is problematic for him because then Steam started to recommend to him and not to me for some reason just a shit ton of hentai games, and he's
because I like visual novels and also dating games. the number of large-breasted women games that are recommended to me is big.
I don't understand why I'm not getting that. I'm
Well,
really disappointed.
if you'd like me to, I can forward some lovely honey pop and hentai opportunities for you, and very poorly produced porn games. I think I had 3 in my what do they call it? Not the wish list, the Steam recommended games. When they curate a set of
exactly.
whatever they call it.
Well, when you do that, please CC my wife. I think that would be perfect.
Oh, I'm sure that it would be great for both of you and experience the gift that keeps on giving.
We do want to do gaming nights once a week. We've mainly done golf with friends, but I'm sure hentai is just
it's right around the corner. It's
exactly
the experience. That's okay. I don't know if I should admit this or not, but many years ago on the Mac SE30, which is one of the computers I owned, which was one of those little small box Macs. The SE30 had a weird story anyway, because the SE30 was originally, you know how there was like the Apple IIe, 2C,
yep,
2X,
I played
and all
those.
that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And the letter after the number indicated the processor that was in it.
Oh, okay.
The original little square box Mac was a 6800 processor. And then there was another one that had the O20 chips and the O30 chips, which was what was in the SE30. But they didn't originally intend to call it the SE30. See, the O30 chips used the letter X as its designator.
Oh.
But apparently the idea of a Mac SE/X was considered bad marketing ideas.
I think they should have just gone for it.
I think so too. It was a sexy machine. It was one of the few of the black and white 9 inches that there was an unused expansion card in there that you could actually put in, and I was able to turn it into a color monitor, which is really weird.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I burned out the machine, but it's really awesome.
I feel like even if the game wasn't fantastic, or the system wasn't fantastic, the name alone would sell it these days.
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic system for the time.
Yeah.
But the reason I mentioned it was that there was I don't know why this comes up in my brain, but we were talking about those hentai games. They had early rude games, and one of them was called Mac Foxes. And I don't even know how it got on my machine, because it clearly wasn't my primary interest, but it involved a couple of paper doll young ladies and then a series of objects that one would, let's say, rub up against these young ladies. And then it was you had a meter of excitement, and you had to alter the materials. And weirdly, amongst those of us who were playing it mostly as a joke, I was quite good at it, which I felt was clearly the first thing that showed you, just like that in a video game, being a really good sniper in a video game does not make you an expert in guns.
True.
Being an expert in McFoxes did not make me an expert in other areas of romantic interlude. So.
Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, I think is what it's called, right?
$15, I think, maybe 30, with some really cool, what do they call it? Gaming tat, the various different little pieces. That will be available, and it's going to be available on console, which is really cool.
But you're picking up, I believe, on PC, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The other thing that's really interesting is that, and I will say this, that I don't think it's a spoiler to say that after the game, there's a whole ARG that was in the game files, and that's also something that'd be really fascinating to find out how that's going to translate, or if that's going to translate to the console release.
They've got to frame it in you're at a computer, and then the game starts, and then you go into the computer, and just fills up your screen. But at the end, you pull back, and you're back on a computer, I assume.
Yeah, but the ARG was actually in the files of the game.
Yeah.
I don't know, and maybe it's just that you have to go into the videos and see it. But it's a great game. Don't Look it up on the internet. Just experience it. It's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
So why don't you hit me with one, then I'll hit you with there are two that were big for me. And that was one. What's one that really hit your fancy?
One was yesterday, actually, and after we talked, because I think we talked on Friday, Rocksmith Plus at the Ubisoft conference. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rocksmith, but it's basically a music education software. So it gamifies teaching you how to play guitar. And I've played guitar since I was a teenager, so it's that's my instrument. That's what I do. But Rocksmith has been fun to help me learn lots of songs that I love that I never really sat down with the tab or the chords or whatever to learn. So gamifying is great. But they basically wrapped up Rocksmith. They had 10 years of adding songs, and they're like, we're done. This is the last pack. I forget who the last pack was. And I thought they were just done with Rocksmith, but they announced yesterday Rocksmith Plus, which they've revamped. It's like a subscription service, basically. I'm not sure how much it's going to be, but they've revamped the interface. There's a lot of different ways to interact with the songs. Before, it was kind of like a Guitar Hero, like the notes kind of coming at you and playing the guitar as a real guitar, but looking like Guitar Hero, sort of. But now they've put in tab, which is how I play songs. And I don't know if you're familiar with tablature, but no. for guitar, it basically shows the 6 strings, then it shows a number, and that's the fret that you play. So as you're learning the new songs, like, I don't know, Everlong by Foo Fighters or whatever, it just shows you the tab. So you're able to play the tab as you go. So it gamifies different sections of the song, and then you can loop the whole song and get points. And as you're playing the game, you're learning the song. And there's a ton of different sections where it's not just learning the song, but learning scales, learning chord progressions, basically making my guitar my video game controller, which is really fun, but also learning cool stuff. And the other bonus about Rocksmith, and the reason why I bought it in the first place, is it came with a cable that you plug into your electric guitar. That's the 1/4-inch, I don't know, like a headphone jack. And then on the other side is a USB. So I bought that just so I could use it to record guitar on my computer, because I didn't have a way to do that. And then that cord, like, that's the first time that I saw that cord. So I bought the game, and then I started playing the game. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I was pretty happy to see that they're bringing it back and upgrading it. My daughter is getting really into rock music. She's just about to turn 4, and her favorite band is the Foo Fighters right now. So she's just like air guitaring all over the house constantly. We bought her a wooden guitar for her birthday so she can rock out, and she just wants me to pull out my guitar and play with her. And so it's something that we will probably do together as well. So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So I'm stoked.
Yeah, it was the evolution of computers being a viable alternative to at least begin to explore, whether it's learning musical notation or playing musical instruments or encouraging people to learn. Obviously, the whole phenomena of the playable instrument games and the beat games was really fascinating, because, it had followed up from the arcade dancing games.
Oh yeah, Dance Revolution on that stuff. Yeah.
And then suddenly, when people had the 2 major franchises on console that were available, both of which, unfortunately kind of died out, but so many people became these really group games in the same way that showed the genius later of things like the Wii and Wii Bowling and all this, showing that there's a lot of gaming variability that we don't tap into. It doesn't just have to be casting spells and beating up orcs, though. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. My daughter is also into that, by the way.
Oh, yes. I'm so proud of her. I follow your journey together with joyous anticipation. And in fact, I assume that at some point there will be a subsidiary Prof and daughter play games.
Oh my God. I've never thought about that, but yes, there will be. I'm sure of it.
Because you've already had some really lovely, and for those who haven't checked them out on YouTube, Larry's done some really excellent discourse in reference to gaming with his daughter, and I'm sure he would love that those YouTube views get up at least into the double digits. So
I think that first one's double digits.
Huh?
I think that first one is double digits.
Yes, but anyway, it would be lovely to support the Prof of Prof and Dev Play Games. So go and watch or listen to his presentation. It's really quite lovely and worth your time. There, shameless plug for shit I'm involved in.
Well, thank you. Yes, I really enjoyed doing those, and I have more planned. I just haven't done them, and I need to. 30 views, by the way, the first one. I just pulled it up.
Ooh, well, I did not mean to slander your massive audience draw.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a good idea, though. But she's, obviously into some of the the games that we play, but the novels and stories that we're reading are very fantastical, and I cannot wait for those later days when we're playing those kind of games together. Play some ESO together or something like that.
Her imagination is brilliant, and again, I think that not to pat you and Anthony too much on the back by breaking my arms, but the clear manner in which that you all's parenting displays the joy of gaming, and also the way that you integrate, and also your daughter integrates play into these and explores these worlds with the toys, the poppets,
Oh yeah.
Even if the race car isn't hooked up, running around and creating the track, it's really heartwarming as sort of a drive-by uncle over here who enjoys listening to it, because my two nieces are only a little bit into video games. They have other interests that they love, but particularly my younger niece, she's very much into Roblox.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so Uncle Bill and my husband have both had to be good, quote unquote, gunkle supporters and buy them Roblox money so they can microtransaction their way into a proper economy. So
you're helping all the people who bought into the Roblox IPO a couple months ago.
I'm glad that I can be part of a capitalist society. So it's all.
So what else, E3 announcement wise, stood out to you?
The biggest one, and I think we'd mentioned this before as well, and I'm just my flabber is happily gasted at Tiny Tina's Wonderland.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I am just joyous for. And this is primarily because my husband and I, although it's not a game that either of us would be known for, I'm obviously, I do a lot of things, turn-based strategy, RPGs, and as will be seen by some of the discussions here, I have very weird and eclectic tastes, but first-person shooters are not my normal gig, and whenever I tell somebody I do some first-person shooters, I'm always looked at askance. And even less so for my husband, who is more of a sim guru than anything else. And he and I have both our gaming time together has been during the pandemic, Borderlands 3.
Oh, yeah.
And we have really gotten into that. Of course, he loves the dress up, and all this. But, I mean, one good example of modding was that at one point the cloud save for him got corrupted. And he lost all of his cosmetics.
Oh, no.
And that's half the game for him. I mean, shit, that's why we play Mass Effect, is to get the fish in the tank, right? Get those quarters made up and, have the different costumes.
Right.
I think all my games in the end become a little bit Sims when, I really enjoy the customizations.
Oh, my God, that's why you need to play the last DLC of Witcher 3.
Oh, I'm so excited. So, yeah. Oh, are there cute little customizations in that too?
Yes. That doesn't exist in the other two games, other two pieces of the game. Yep.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, it's so we had to go in and find the files that had the cosmetics already in them, and so we were able to reload them into his character. But because having to go back and hunt for them was just not fun.
No, it doesn't sound good.
So. But anyway, so yeah, the Tiny Tina's thing, which is based off of probably the best DLC from Borderlands 2. For those
Dragon Keep or something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's so in Borderlands 2, Tiny Tina, for those who aren't aware, is voiced by a very enthusiastic character actress who is apparently a deep geek gamer herself, which I'm just charmed by. And she is a very young girl who likes explosives and is clearly out of her brain. Also, an out lesbian character, ultimately it comes out to be. and she is kind of one of the fun, crazy characters there, but due to, and again, trying to avoid spoilers of now a decade-old game, but the events of the primary game lead to a character passing away, and ostensibly the DLC, even though it's one of the sweetest and most heartwarming ones, although it has a lot of funny, and it's her playing basically a version of D&D with the primary characters of Borderlands 2.
Right.
But it's also her way of dealing with grief. And it's ultimately a story about processing death, but using it and her using storytelling to try and grapple with it. It is a beautiful, beautiful DLC. And it makes, and Borderlands is a game we'll be addressing later when we talk about representation, because it is a weird game, and that it can be, and Randy Pitchford is a butt.
Oh my God.
And yet some of the things that are in the Borderlands universe are, I mean, they can be awful and they can be awesome, and, you know, no game is perfect, but, you know, enjoy the art for what it is, and take what you love and try and, you know, understand or revise the rest, but don't ignore it, you know, for the problems that it has, which has been our discussion even virtually in Persona 4. I am honored that my ghost has been haunting your last couple of podcasts, particularly as you all discussed Persona 4, and I really appreciate you and Anthony's discussion of how complicated it is. And there's even a more complicated thing, because which again we might get into later, but the character that was somewhat complicated in that game, there's more than one, was weirdly lauded originally by the queer community for representation. So that was an interesting thing. But anyway, Tiny Tina, basically Borderlands, but with spells and craziness and a D&D universe, but also a meta game of Tiny Tina being DM. I'm all in.
It's like, when I saw that reveal, I got super excited, even though I'm not really that big into Borderlands. My friend Travis and I have been playing Borderlands 3 for the past, I don't know, probably month and a half or so, and I'm enjoying it. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, but it's not, so far, not a universe that I'm super excited about, except for the Telltale Borderlands game, which I thought was fucking awesome, maybe my favorite Telltale game. But the Tiny Tina's Wonderland looks just the D&D hook of that. And are you saying that the DLC from Borderlands 2 was the same thing?
Yeah, that's where it started. No, it is absolutely. If you can, if you're willing to, and it makes most sense if you're able to. Though if you've played Borderlands 3, you already know a bit of the spoilers, because you know the outcome of some characters.
Boy, I wouldn't say that's true, because I've been playing with Travis and another friend, and we just talk shit, we're talking to each other the whole time. I have no idea what's happening in the story at all.
Oh, okay.
So
there is, but if you're willing to, the problem with Borderlands is it's not a good single player game. It is not an experience that's fun.
Yeah. As
an individual, but it is joyous as you know, in couples and groups, as you obviously experience it. And my actor friend Anthony was the one who first got me into Borderlands, because he's, you know, he's big in now CBS Discovery and all this sort of things. But he was always a geek, just people didn't realize it. And he's also a gamer. In fact, I'm so proud of him. He's, you know, I know the politics of this podcast, so I can say this. He raised money for Biden. He was a big activist, and he's also been a big geek, and has been, he played his first Dungeons and Dragons game with me as DM, but now has been involved in, you know, kind of like the Mark Meer type public gaming of where, like, some of the Star Trek people do podcasts with games. And so I'm so proud of him. So
that's awesome. Well, I think I need to go back to 2 to play Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep.
It's a wonderful thing. If I happen to be in the place where I can join you, maybe I'll experience it. Maybe I can get my husband involved, because he's never played Borderlands 2.
Oh, okay.
Now, how would you be playing it though? On what?
Well, I have it on PS4, but I'm looking at it right now on Steam, because I figured that's where we'd be playing it. So I might.
Yeah. By the way, the Steam sales are, I think, the 24th. It's been leaked.
Okay, great. So, then I shall.
Yeah, wait for that. But yeah, almost anything along those lines. So.
Awesome.
Okay. What else from What else did you get excited by? Because those were the two big ones for me, and I haven't
Sorry,
caught up all the news, so I didn't know if like Dragon Age finally made any real announcements.
I didn't see that, no. I'm going to give you just a quick drive-by of a couple of things. Elden Ring got revealed at the Summer Game Fest, and I'm excited just because George R. R. Martin has a hand in that. But I'm not really a Dark Souls-y kind of guy. I would be remiss not to mention this. Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which is the XCOM-y Mario Rabbids game on Switch, which is just... I fucking love that game. That's the game that I played holding my daughter when she was sleeping just after she was born, just all night, just, up with her, just as a new father, just like, is this kid breathing? Is she living? Is she going to make it through the night? So I just stay up and I play this game. I have such good memories of that game. So I'm so excited there's a sequel. And then Yakuza Like a Dragon coming to Game Pass is awesome because now I can play it because I have Game Pass. And then the final thing, which I think is also exciting for you, if I remember correctly, Diablo 2 Resurrected has a release date of September 23rd, which is a friend of the podcast, Travis's birthday. So he's excited about that coming out on his birthday.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Blizzard games. I played Diablo 1, and actually there was again, this is getting into a slightly more ancient history, but there was I don't know if you're familiar with that there was an unofficial expansion to Diablo that was made not by Blizzard, and long before there were like unofficial patches and mods. There was a company that made an extra class and other stuff for Diablo 1 that got hacked into that. And I really enjoyed Diablo 1. I enjoyed Diablo 2. I never quite really got fully through Diablo 3 because some of the repetitiveness of the ARPG, and plus I was kind of playing it solo.
Yeah.
And as it got to things like the kind of the greediness of trying to have the way that loot and the auction house type thing.
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of soul deadening for me, and so I fell out of it. But I really love people at Blizzard. I have friends and ex-students who currently work at Blizzard.
Yeah, me too.
And so I'm very, in fact, one of them has been very kind and occasionally, supplemented various, but in fact, I was very sad because, she invited me to the blue carpet, not the red carpet of the, Warcraft movie. Now I know the way that most people react to the Warcraft movie would say I was spared, but I would have still loved it. And she'd invited my husband and I, and she was an ex-student of mine that I just adore. She and her husband are lovely. She's a great geeky mom, lover of zombies. I don't know, Alyssa, if you're out there, shout out to you. You are awesome. So anyway,
I don't know you, but if Bill says you're awesome, I agree. So.
Oh, she is awesome.
People, big fans of Diablo like me and Anthony and other people we know, felt the same way about 3. When it came out, we were just like, ugh. And I got through it because I co-opted with my mom all the way through, and we finished it together. That's kind of what we do when a new Diablo comes out. But I'm just like it's Mass Effect, and then that's gonna get me all the way through to Diablo 3. Like it's just the I don't know, summer into fall of old new games. So that's made me very excited. There's a bunch of other stuff coming out of E3 right now, but nothing that rises to the level of super excitement probably until Nintendo on Tuesday. So that's kind of my E3 rundown.
Okay, well, I will, if by our next podcast, if any more news dribbles out or things that catch my eye, but my biggest problem has been the other announcement. Maybe we'll discuss it in the next podcast, since I have been joyfully and happily recruited, and I am honored to serve for 2 of these in a row. We may be discussing building gaming PCs or just accessing modern hardware, which has become during the pandemic a crisis in and of itself.
Oh yeah.
But the news that NVIDIA that came out is discontinuing support for drivers for Windows through 8.1.
Oh, you're being forced to buy a new PC.
Well, I've been having problems. I can't play Cyberpunk right now. I can't play Evil Genius 2, which is a game I've been really looking forward to, and I did pre-purchase it, and I can't access it.
Yeah, I feel sad for you for one of those two.
Yeah. So it's well, my husband played a lot of Cyberpunk, but still it clearly has to. But we both pre-purchased it, and he, as a gift for me, had for Christmas pre-purchased Vampire the Masquerade 2, which we haven't released it yet, but I'm hoping it will eventually be released, or I guess I'll eventually get a refund for it probably. But I just have such high hopes for that game, but we will see. So, but yeah, we can definitely do that. So
yeah, that'll be next podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to start the representation conversation? We're only 45 minutes in. Clearly, we're doing a very timely job.
Buckle up, audience. We're going to be here for a long time. Yeah, we're talking about representation in video games, and Bill had brought to me some interesting questions that made me think back on my history of playing video games. Like the first video game I played where there was a video game like protagonist or a video game character of color, and I had to sit and think for a long time about that. But maybe I'll throw it to you and kind of pose the question to the audience and kind of, frame the context for this discussion.
Yeah, so I had a couple things. So there's I wanted to very quickly perhaps address and start with a very simple framework by starting with, I mean, obviously something that I think is obvious to us, but maybe not to everybody because we are steeped in academia. So the idea of importance of representation is a conversation that we have on a thrice daily basis. Mm-hmm. And here, so why don't I throw it to you first in this sort of framework is saying, so to you, why do you feel that representation matters? Why is it important?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I feel it's important. There are so many different kinds of people who play video games. And just like with other media, like I was doing the class that I just taught, which is transfer level English, couched in ESL, was about representation in media of people of color. And primarily that's who my students were. And some of them hadn't had that reflection on the importance of having people in media, in leads in movies or TV shows or books that look like them, that represent them. And when we started exploring that, like it was like a really, for them and for me too, just a really profound journey through our course and understanding, like them reflecting on not having that and realizing that they didn't have that in the media that they watched growing up. And I just feel that way for people playing video games. If it's gamers of color, if it's female gamers, if it's gay gamers, to grow up, people my age, for the most part, playing video games where your protagonist is, a mustachioed plumber, etc. I think it's hard to not feel yourself represented. And maybe there was, I don't know if it was the bridge, like character creators, where like I'm finally represented because I get to build my own character, but no one built a real character. Like no one built a whole full story for me. And I feel like representation in video games is so important on one hand because people, like just the interactive experience of video games is such that living vicariously through a character that really does represent many facets of your identity is just so much more immersive. And it just makes me sad that people haven't had that. And then on top of that, now raising a daughter where I'm super conscious about the media where we are, super conscious about the media that we introduce to her to make sure that there's female protagonists that care about something other than how they look or the boy who is looking at them, female protagonists who are adventurous and just doing really, stereotypically boy things, basically going on adventures and such. And there's not a lot right? Like she's super into the Legend of Zelda. She really likes Link, and I want to find that kind of game with like a female protagonist that is appropriate for her age. And obviously that's hard as well because most things are not appropriate for her age anyways. But even like Zelda in that game is she's somewhat passive, not very passive, because she does have like, she's one part of the key to defeat Ganon, and she does have agency, but it's not nearly as much as Link, or it's not nearly as much as I would want it to be. So to see games where she can see herself represented, like, is just, obviously I think people, when you personalize it, it becomes like so much more important and powerful. But I would like to think, and I believe that this was important to me before I saw that reflected in what my daughter is not seeing in media.
Oh, yeah. And, it is sad, even though I'm not my Nintendo console experience really goes back to Duck Hunt. So the modern Nintendo consoles haven't been my experience. So I am not steeped in the Mario or in the Link universe. But the discussions I've heard about, even the sadness that they haven't really, like, Linkle, who apparently began to have her own kind of storyline, but was originally just kind of like a clone. But, the idea that they haven't had as many of these playable characters, that it's been mostly in games where it's generic, the importance of the Mario Kart games where women could be drivers and throw shells and make people upset too, which is awesome. But yeah, it would be very nice to see more of that, and we'll discuss that too. For me, the two things that are important is that people do want to have these heroic fantasies, want to have these experiences, and it's funny because the people who object to them, and here I want to call out a little bit in a positive way the YouTuber Council of Geeks, who did an episode on this a while back, I think. But there's a lot of gamers that get very upset when diversity characters beside the beardy father or the grizzled white guy is the main character. And, they'll say, oh, you're isolating your audience, or you're, if it's a good character, that it shouldn't make a difference. Well, if it's a good character, then it shouldn't make a difference that it's a black person or a gay person or whatever.
Right.
On the flip side, in fact, one of the things you might be feeling as a stress is that if to imagine you have 1,000 games that represent you, and then you play one and you say, oh, wow, this one doesn't quite represent me and I feel taken out of it, then imagine if 1,000 games don't represent you.
Right.
And the ability for people to find inside of the relationships, inside of the tones, the language, the culture of games, the voice actors, the representation, things that reflect some of their experience, whether they are grounded in the real world or in fantastic worlds. One of the reasons we play games is because we're moved by them. They mean things to us. They are experiences that are tied sometimes, like you have, to times and places, such as, being awake with your daughter, experiencing it with other people. But there are also stories that move us. People who've played, these, again, Doki Doki is one that you just don't forget that. And that becomes the water cooler conversation amongst gamers as much as Game of Thrones was a moment for everybody, or the O.J. Simpson trial, right?
Right.
These cultural touchstones. I did want to say that it's important to have this representation. I also wanted to kind of put in my own disclaimers here. I did want to talk, obviously, when we talk diversity, there's a lot of different types of diversity. I don't know that I am qualified to talk on all of them. So in terms of ableist and ability diversity, I don't feel like I have enough knowledge to describe that or talk about it in this podcast. When talking about underrepresented ethnic groups, obviously, as I represented myself, I am a cis white male. I happen to be gay, but that's the only little bit of weirdness. I'm fat, so I'm definitely in the majority in America. So it makes it hard for me to claim that when we talk about these underrepresented groups, I'm not an expert in saying this is their experience. Now, my husband is half Jamaican and half German. And so him growing up in a biracial household with many of the experiences of being someone who is reflected on black and racism, and his experiences, which he shared with me, will be part of this conversation. But again, I wouldn't want to claim that just because that we discuss these issues that I'm in any ways an expert in any of those. And even inside the queer community, there's a lot of things like my experience as a gay male and an older gay male is not the same as somebody who is, bisexual or trans, and I don't want to, or intersex, or any of the other elements that we put into that broad umbrella of queer. So even though that we're going to be discussing it, I want to put in the big asterisk at the front that just because that I'm trying to represent my understanding of it and my readings of it, I don't want to claim that I am the final arbiter of good or bad for any of these things, just my observations of them.
Yeah, I think that's important to point out. I appreciate you saying that.
So, long ago I said, I'd had this conversation about representation of gays in games, and so I'm a historian. I probably should have said that up front. And one thing that historians like to do is look at material culture. And in pop culture, representations of the other is something that is a really big deal. One of our other colleagues, another fellow named Matt, who is not my husband, but who is a fellow historian and mutual friend, I know, he had grandparents who were interred during Japanese internment, and he is very close to the Japanese internment movement, and he's done an excellent talk on how pop culture represented Japanese and Asian characters in general during the run-up to World War II. And so it's not uncommon for us to look at editorial cartoons and images and material culture. My background includes the history of slavery, so obviously most slavery and Reconstruction, and the images of African Americans and how that they were portrayed in popular culture. So this led me to take a sabbatical and do work on the representation of queer characters in video games and also in comic books, and to tie this sort of what I call static culture, the culture where you simply consume it passively, and then interactive culture and what challenges video games presented and opportunities they presented in terms of representation. Now, so the framework I was going to suggest is talking about the past about these video games, is that to talk about two different things about representation. One, the roles that these others, what minority characters, underrepresented characters are, whether as villains, NPCs, sidekicks, or main playable heroes. What's the difference between when you can create your own character, as you talked about, versus when a character is created and is the primary protagonist of a game, as we see a lot in our adventure games and that sort of thing.
Right.
And then also, some places where even when there's representation, is it, and I know this is the fun academic word, problematic, but what are the questions about like casting voice actors and are there things that, and obviously, we can't do the entire history, but we can look at some highlights along the way. And so that was why I'd asked you that original question of, let's start with that. What was your first experience with a person of color or of that as a main character for you?
Yeah, so I think it was Street Fighter 2, where you have like a group of characters that are spanning the globe, right? And you have Dalsim, who's Indian, and I think that is probably the first character of color that I played as. I'm not sure if you'd call that a protagonist.
Yeah, it's hard when it's a beat 'em up, right? But
well, and I feel like that's I want to use the word easy, but I feel like the cast of characters is so large, and any character is like the main character. Like there's a history, I think, of having more diverse characters in those games. And I'm not, going to the role. I'm not sure if that is akin to the other thing that I was thinking about, which is Lee Everett, who was the main character, I guess, with Clementine, who's also a character of color in the Walking Dead, Telltale's The Walking Dead, which is a lot more agency with that character, and a lot that is he is and she is, they're the drivers of that story, whereas Dalsim, for example, you could never engage with that person, and even if you did, like, boy, when you talk about problematic, like the depiction of, it's just a stereotypical depiction, unfortunately. And I think probably even before that, my experience with Final Fantasy VII with Barrett, who's a black character, and I didn't experience that playing it. I experienced that watching my friend play Final Fantasy VII. They're a main character in the game, but they're not your main character. They're a sidekick. They're part of your party, basically. And they have voiced lines and such, but not enough, like to flesh out the character very well, compared to like the remake now. But those are the ones that, like, harkening back to the early games that I played, those are the ones that come to mind. And I feel like of them all, Lee from The Walking Dead is the most fully realized, mostly non-stereotypical.
Yeah, it's and this gets back to the idea of in my talk I characterized that there's kind of, in my mind, 3 stages of how the other is represented, and originally there is the primary representation early on is either as the grotesque, which is using an 18th century term, but a stereotypical parody, usually using the most ugly and grotesque parts of a character's personality, and or the villain, and sometimes both, right?
Right.
Then there is a secondary level where there's representation where you get sort of like sidekicks and NPCs, but even that ends up leading to complications because, and we can here talk about experiences that people could probably put to their mind more familiarly, is women in video games, or in media in general. In fact, there's the infamous phrase for comic books, the woman in the refrigerator.
Right.
Which, for those who aren't familiar, would you like to describe that one, since I think that's one you know, or?
Yeah, so a woman being fridged in a comic book is basically that they are they're the catalyst for the male story because they were iced, they were killed. Yes,
literally a reference to a Green Lantern story where his wife was murdered and stuck in a refrigerator.
There you go. Yep. That's their whole agency.
Yes,
they're the catalyst for the male story.
Yeah, and so the question of is there so looking at the way that women have obviously been often hypersexualized or don't have their own stories and all that, and that's not to say there weren't, but there are there, and then eventually having the agency to be the primary character. And that's the upper goal of any story, I think, for people who hope to see representation. My earliest games, I went back and looked at it. The first thing I could think of was, now when it comes to characters, of course, this can be also stereotyped and problematic, is Asian characters in things like the first early game, Karateka, which I don't know if you're familiar with or not.
I'm not, no.
Yeah, Karateka was the precursor to Prince of Persia, same author. And long before Prince of Persia, he had this, and it's you can still it's free online, you can play it. It definitely used the quote unquote kung fu movie style images of a kind of mythic Japan. Now, mind you, this is on an Apple II system, so it's very basic. But right. But it was a representation. The most colorful thing about Karateka, now mind you, this dates back to 5 1/4 inch discs, was that Karateka had one of the most unusual Easter eggs at the time. which was that, again, for those 5.25-inch floppy disks, if you turn the disk upside down and put the disk in the drive, there was a copy of the game on the back of the disk that was upside down and reversed the controls.
What was the point of that?
It was just an Easter egg. It was just kind of weird and fun. And nobody had seen anything like it before, and it was never documented. So when people found out about it, it was just like, oh my God, this is really cool. Kind of like a weird mode to play. Later, Prince of Persia was an interesting one, because in Prince of Persia, here you have a character who's clearly, although, says Persian, but it feels, less Persian and a little bit more Arabian Nights, right? It's complicated because Arabian Nights is Indian, but it's been translated through the Middle East in this weird kind of mishmash over time. But the character originally had blonde hair, which is maybe not as indicative of those groups. But then again, considering that if you look at the original Prince of Persia and how pixelated it is, you were just joking about, the mustachioed plumber, and as I'm sure you know, Mario's mustache was a programming thing.
Right, because it was like, I remember the story that they couldn't articulate his lips or something like that. They needed to put a mustache to make him stand out.
From the nose to the mouth, and that didn't work, and so his mustache was entirely a pixel of convenience, in order to break between the nose and mouth. And so I don't, when you have very limited color palettes and all this, I want to give a little bit of a break, to these characters. But Prince of Persia 2, even with the cutscenes, even though it did have some stereotypical uncomfortable things in it as well, but at least it had a protagonist and a princess, and a very standard you got to save the princess thing. So not superb on the gender side, but in terms of at least having a protagonist who was acknowledged as being non-white. The other groups that were non-white protagonists, I don't think this is a video game that's brought up much for that, was the Civilization series.
Oh, that's true.
Where you could select to be other cultures. Now, it wasn't really until Civ 3 that we began to see, like, for example, there were obviously there were different leaders, and some of them had different advantages, but, obviously there was a little Western culture lens. I think that by the time we got to Civ 3, like, you look at the wonders in Civ 3, and you begin to see things like Angkor Wat and the Hagia Sophia, these sorts of things. Well, I think the Sophia was in the previous one as well. But you have a lot more representation of things in Africa, the Middle East, in Asia, and not just Western Europe, in terms of interesting ideas, and cultural representations. So I think that's one that should get a shout out, even though it doesn't often do so.
Yeah, because I feel like sometimes we focus on, like, I don't know, like the story. I guess Civ has a story, but like this in some way. But the story-based, like, single protagonist moving through an adventure, or something like that. But you're right. That's a good point.
And in so many games, the characters are thought to not be viable. I mean, like, for example, technically, one of our most iconic female characters, quote unquote, was originally designed to be Hispanic and then was created to be British.
Who are we talking about?
A woman named Laura Cruz.
Oh my gosh, Laura Croft?
Laura Croft was originally supposed to be Laura Cruz.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I believe she was originally supposed to be South American, actually, originally. And then she was, but in development, they changed her to being, but I mean, she's a very tan British woman,
Yeah, right.
But I mean, mind you, she had very polygonal moments, right? Even in the early development. But I mean, what an amazing thing to recognize that the original character idea was supposed to be, Latinx, and how wonderful it would have been if they just left it. I mean, she could have been Latinx in a British household due to the, what little backstory was in the original games, and
right, exactly. Explain it with one sentence. But was that like focus tested out, or
no? It was. I'm trying to remember the full context of it, but it was there was two designers, and one guy said that felt that Laura Cruz would maybe not be quote unquote, and I believe the quote was something like UK friendly enough or something like that, and so they decided to rename her. But it's not the first or last time. And the same thing is that, and this gets to some of those problems in representation that lots of the first characters that we run into, and this is the same thing in any medium, right? Asian people are generally either scientists, nail salon operators, or secret kung fu masters, right?
Right.
But if they're secret kung fu masters, they or run laundries or whatnot. But the secret kung fu masters, of course, are always waiting for the white dude to come along, aka the Karate Kid, right, to train.
So they can impart all their knowledge onto them.
Yes. Then you have the so these are the problems with that representation. Same thing, Hispanic and black characters have almost always, early on been thugs and gang members and lower socioeconomic classes and grotesques that, don't barely rise against some of the unpleasant things that we've seen in media and elsewhere. So it's not unusual that we've seen the same kind of progression in media. And of course, gay characters were almost non-existent and mostly joke characters, right? For their flamboyance or all that. Although there is, for those who are interested, there is I believe it was in Sweden, something called Rainbow Arcade, which was a museum exhibit on queer gaming history from 1985 to 2018. You can still get, I think, the PDF of the exhibit out there. And it's, I actually backed the exhibit on Kickstarter when it came out. And there are some really early weird games that were out there, like the PC game Gay Blade, which I did play and I thought was shit, but one of the earliest ones was a 1989 adventure game called Caper in the Castro, which was a kind of murder mystery game, point and click, and all that. But there were always, gay characters were always either hypersexualized, they were the villains, they were, let's just say frequently deeply uncomfortable characters. And, again, if people are interested, if you, somewhere on YouTube, if you Google, why is my elf gay? It's Batman's fault. You can hear my entire lecture on this thing where I go through some of the history. So it is a complicated set of representations for queer characters, and even more so for transgender characters. Poison, who was originally in one of these beat 'em up games, was originally a woman in the Japanese game, and then they thought, if she's a woman, then we're beating up women, and that's bad. So they decided to make her a trans character because beating up trans characters is better, which is awkward in the extreme. They're clearly characters who have been encoded as lesbian, but usually only for the male gaze, right? Under that. Gay male characters. Shadow Hearts had a vendor character, Gerard Magamel, and his brother Pierre, who were very, very flamboyant. And in fact, in Shadow Hearts from the New World in 2005, Magamel did get a boyfriend, but they appear riding a bike in leather outfits, the most important, the most standard things. But, there's also been games that have been really interesting about it. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic had accidentally the first lesbian couple in the Star Wars universe.
I haven't played it, so what was accidental about it?
So there was an NPC that had a storyline, and I think, if I remember the story correctly, she was originally supposed to be a male character, and they had her dialogue recorded that the quest you go on for her is to find a female character. And then later the character design was decided to be female. but the dialogue about the looking for the female partner remained.
They never changed that.
And they never changed that. And so she technically became, as just a weird side note, the first canonically lesbian character in the whole Star Wars universe.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool. I recently, speaking of, again, representation, and this is one of those problem things, even though I appreciate it for what it was trying to do, was Jade Empire, which had a lot of... Now, you've played Jade Empire too, right?
I haven't, no.
Oh.
No, I own it, but I never have.
Yeah, so Jade Empire was famous at the time for, taking the BioWare Knights of the Old Republic engine, the kind of light side, dark side, but calling it open palm and closed fist, right? Trying to have this alignment kind of thing. It definitely borrowed a lot from a lot of the different martial arts type style movies that were from Asia, and not just, Japan, but also there's a lot of Chinese stuff in here as well, clearly. It's in the fictional universe of the Jade Empire, and they even created a fake Asian language, which I think you would find fascinating. And some of the characters, because it's the old language, some characters speak only in it, and then the translation is given across the screen as they speak in this language. But apparently it was put together for that. But on the other hand, while some of the female companion actors were voice actors who were Asian women or people of color, the male actors overwhelmingly were white. And some of them had more appropriate voices that would have not been out of place for the character. But then on the other hand, there were some characters who were a little bit more bro dude, and again, not that, I don't want to say you can't represent, but it definitely, just the tone and the language and the construction of it felt unfortunate, because here was a game that could have represented even better. It also was one that, like the BioWare games, offered gay romance, but the gay male thing was just awful. So, like with the BioWare formula became, all right, we're going to have one male character that's exclusively heterosexual you can try and knob up to, one female character that's entirely heterosexual, and then one female and one male character who are kind of like bisexual. So if you want to go the straight route, you have two possible options. If you want to go gay, you might have one option for each of your either female or male protagonists.
Right.
So that used to be the primary formula. The problem was, for the gay male character, they were so afraid of offending people that it is very hard to get the male romance. And I just recently in my playthrough tried to get it, and I just couldn't do the options to force it, because in order to trigger the gay male romance, you actually had to be like a woman hater. You had to turn down female advances, but like be rude to your two female possible romances. And I got locked out of romance because I just couldn't be rude enough to my female companions. I just can't play that way.
So are they feeding into the idea that if you're gay, you have to hate women?
Is that what can't answer that. I can't speak to the writers of it. Just even being, I knew in my first playthrough, I never knew when I played it many years ago when it first came out, I didn't even know there was a romanceable male option. And then later finding out he will only speak up about possible romance because his storyline is that he's a widower and he's kind of driven by revenge, and he's kind of a Han Solo Asian rogue kind of dude. He's lost it all, and now he's after the people who enslaved and killed his wife and daughter type thing. Mm-hmm. So he's on the dark side of the law, but has a heart of gold, kind of thing. Charming character, but again, the only way that it's really tricky to trigger that romance, and the only way to trigger it is by very specifically doing things that I think would be just rude to other people, and so I just wasn't able to do it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to inhabit a character that I think the renegade choices of Mass Effect, where you just sometimes just being a complete jerk, and it's like I that's not who I am.
Yeah, I don't really do evil playthroughs. I just suck at it.
Yeah, right.
That's why that there are games when they're tailored that way, it's sort of a comic or joyous one like Overlord or the Evil Genius series, where you're the bad guy, the dungeon keeper type things. I think that has a lot of joy to it. The first inversion like that I know of was one of the early Wizardry games. Again, way back in the Pixel days, but I think it was Wizardry 3, where you're actually the undead bad guy and you're fighting up from the dungeon to go get the heroes who killed you in the first 2 games.
Huh.
So that was definitely a different outtake. But yeah, it's so can you think of any other either NPCs or player characters that you've played with that you felt were really either good representations or awkward ones? Or maybe we should just make recommendations of various games or talk about a couple of exemplars, because I know we're running into good time here and we haven't gotten to games we played, and I there's a lot more to discuss, obviously. So.
Well, I think there's just some quick hits. Thinking about Overwatch and Doomfist, and thinking about the character design and wondering if that's problematic. Thinking about something super positive and really recent, Miles Morales.
Oh, absolutely.
The new Spider-Man game. So the Black Latinx main protagonist that was maskless, leading the charge of the new console generation. Like, this is the marquee character selling the new PS5 console, and that's the first time that a character of color has basically led the charge of selling a new console. And for me, it's also slightly problematic in that, for all the good of the way the character is designed, the fact that the voice actor matches the character, the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is Spider-Man 2018 was a long 30-hour huge experience, full priced. This one wasn't. This was a 6 to 10 hour experience, shorter in budget, shorter in scope, and I would like to see that kind of character. Like, this character can lead a huge, bigger game, but it was really, I think Miles Morales is kind of, for me, like a really exciting character to see. Just having the story was so good. The way that the voice actor portrayed the character was so striking and strong, and it's like it's a supremely high selling game, which is nice. In terms of kind of like, I don't know if it's arena shooter, but like battle royale. If you think about Apex Legends, my favorite character to play is Bangalore, who's a black woman. Just a fucking badass, and I just love the way that she's portrayed in that game. And I'm not sure, I haven't read too much into how black women perceive that character. I just know that I appreciate her. I don't know, loadout, basically, the way that she plays in the game. And the last one I want to touch on is just going back to the voice characters. Uncharted 4 and then Lost Legacy, specifically Nadine Ross, who is a black character, who's voiced by Laura Bailey, who I love, but Laura Bailey is really white. And just juxtaposing that to Miles Morales, where the voice actor matches the character. I appreciate that it's difficult to find voice actors and whatever the hiring process is, but boy, I feel like that was problematic at the time, and it still continues to be. I would like to see, those characters voiced by people who can identify with those characters, because I feel like that lends, I don't know, the audience. If you are paying attention enough to know who's behind the, in the booth, basically, it kind of takes something away.
Yeah, it does lend credibility. And that's
it does, absolutely.
It's so a couple things that I thought that were things that I would kind of take down and mention. Interestingly, one of the earliest games that even though the visual representation is very abstract, but it's clearly based out of Latinx culture and was very intended to have the voice actors be all Hispanic / Latinx, were Grim Fandango.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes
is
sense.
and it is a classic for a reason, and it's kind of awesome. And being that that's gotten remastered, that might be worth, people's looking at, in various different
Right.
ways. I
With a
actually
guide.
also asked my friends, by the way. I was on a Skype call with, or not Skype, but what's our favorite now? Zoom.
Discord?
Yeah.
Oh, Zoom. Oh,
Yeah.
fuck yeah.
I'm sorry. I was trying to keep away from anything work, but that does cause.
You did it. Now we're talking about work.
Yep. But we were on a Zoom call, and my friend Nancy, who's also an academic, we have a group of friends from Houston, all this, and a lot of us are gamers, and I was asking people what were their first experiences, and people were also having that kind of struggle to go back and, like, we're saying, oh wow, did the character in the original Wasteland game, which was the precursor to the spiritual precursor to the Fallout games, but now has its own series in itself, was that character maybe Hispanic, right? What about the or a person of color in general, that sort of thing. One of my friends who really loves The Secret World felt that in that MMO, the people of color were well represented in NPCs and the character creator and all that. Another person, brought up the differences in the Elder Scrolls universe, how in some ways there's a lot of, and obviously it's a fantasy universe, but it has both the good and the bad in that representation, and that it's complicated because clearly there's been, voice actors of color and other things, but in addition, there have been character races that are clearly based on cultures that sometimes the characterization, like, although very beloved, the Khajiit can be read in a very specific way that's not comfortable, right?
Right.
The Red Guard have, both positive and negatives to their portrayal. And again, that's where I'm not sure that I have the right to make, that determination. But
Yeah, like I think, many people, and including us, can look at it and say this is characterizing your as a caricature of X, Y, or Z culture, but I don't have the facility of that culture to make that judgment. It just appears that way,
right.
And I would leave that to those cultures to figure that out.
Yeah, I think that in terms of gay culture, obviously the BioWare games have been really important, even though that they have often had their own complications. I think that's why you'll find that, like, my husband loves, never really did Mass Effect, though he's more fantasy than science fiction, but the gay characters in Dragon Age are a lot better in terms of, even though they have their own colorful, I mean, Zevran is clearly Puss in Boots as an elf, but he's awesome, and Fenris is broody and problematic, in his own ways. Liliana is probably one of the best characters as a bisexual badass, that truly evolves her story over the games, even through Inquisition.
Right.
Though, and depending on events of Inquisition can take different kinds of turns, but she's just, amazing as a character. So, and something that I told you, that we went over, Mass Effect originally, had a gay male possibility in Caden in the first Mass Effect, and they recorded the lines and cut it out. And there was a hope that in the remaster that the Caden romance would be reactivated in Mass Effect 1. I don't think it is. I haven't.
No, I don't think it is either.
Obviously the gender bending Asari, even though that they are kind of male gaze female, but then later on what you find in 2 and 3, where when you're in one of the sexualized things where there's a Asari dancer and they're all talking about how they see the Asari dancer in the bar, and each one of them sees the Asari differently.
Right.
And so the idea that your male gaze might be seeing the Asari in a way that you're supposed to see them, which is kind of a really cool lore idea, right?
Right, they project themselves differently to different viewers.
Right, so I think that has a kind of a cool piece to it. There's definitely, and by Mass Effect 3, you could have a gay male romance. You could have a lesbian romance earlier. Sadly, some of the possibilities, people really wanted to romance Jack, and I think she was originally supposed to be able to be romanced, but is not. Or if she is,
Isn't she? she's not romanceable at all by anybody, right?
I don't think so.
Or is it male only?
I don't think that she is, but I think she was originally supposed to be a lesbian option, and she's obviously an awesome and crazy character, you know.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. Again, Mass Effect, it feels like coming home, and I really want to get a computer where I can go back and re-experience that, because one thing that is my biggest heart crime is, though I've played most of the DLCs, I played all the DLCs for 1, and many or most for 2, but not all for 3 because I played it when it came out. So I've never played Citadel.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and that's, you know, my true heart ending is missing, and I am really looking forward to that opportunity. There are, I think when you want to find better representation, indie games have obviously been a space where you can really find some fascinating characters. So I would shout out a couple of them. I think in the last podcast a couple years ago, I mentioned a little visual novel called His Royal Guinness, which is a kingdom management visual novel and romance sim that has political overtones, but it's skinned in East Asian, particularly, you know, what looks like kind of a fantasy Indian kingdom, where you are a not out gay male prince, and your parents go away, and you can influence the laws and the kingdom and whom you might end up getting as a suitor, including the possibility of trying to deal with the possible political consequences of coming out or changing the laws to make gays more accepted, but then the possible backlash of you as a ruler as the prince. So it's a complex and lovely narrative, but a very sweet game. I know you said that you and your wife were thinking of playing Dream Daddy.
Yeah, my wife is not really into video games, and she's into a particular kind, which is basically like games where you play games like a mini golf game or Mario Kart or whatever. But I think Dream Daddy would be really fun to play with her. I'm looking forward to playing it. I'd like to play it with somebody. I think that'd be a fun experience to do together with somebody.
Dream Daddy is a lovely story. Interestingly, it's a lot more about when it says Dream Daddy, although obviously Daddy has a double connotation here. It's a lot more about the relationship between the father and the daughter, actually.
Oh,
and it is a beautiful story. Actually, just to be aware, just like certain visual novels, the flags to get romances can sometimes be really persnickety. And though you should play it the first time around, even if you think you're doing things right and all that, one rule of a lot of visual novels, if it's a romance, is you almost kind of have to choose in advance whom you want to chase, and then like exclusively do things with them, and don't kind of try and explore all the other ones, which I have never liked, because I don't think that's a very realistic, you know, exploration of the way the humans work anyway.
It's also not very fun for like to leave lots of story lines to the side to exclusively chase one.
But so many of them are time management game type things. Another one you might enjoy that also has a kind of fantastical one, which was backed and partially created by Jesse Cox of the who was one of the colleagues of Total Biscuit from the Cynical Brit show before he passed. And Jesse still does a lot of his own stuff, but Monster Prom.
Yeah, that one I've got in my library as well, and I keep hovering over it.
Yeah, it's again one that is a kind of a stats builder, dating sim, time management one, but it's charming and obviously has a lot of, and you know, it like with some things, sometimes you'll say, oh, these characters, I'm not sure I want to date any of them. They're all motherfuckers. But there are some charms to all of them, and so, you know, that's really cool. There's also you know, one of my favorite games where I was, where it's an assigned character that was a minority character. I really thought that Wintermore Tactics Club was a really cute one. And if it goes on sale during the Steam, I think this would be just an awesome one. It deserves a lot more love. It's a visual novel.
To my wish list.
Huh?
I'm adding to my wish list right now.
It's a visual novel, definitely with turn-based tactics. It's sweet. Your main character is a young black girl. That's whom you're playing. and she is just kind of awesome and wonderful, and she's a very stressed out but wanting to be part of a role-playing gaming group. And then the headmaster of the school decides that clubs are going to have to fight each other in snowball fights, and that's the tactical part. And so it's weird because you do these little kind of mini adventures that are gaming adventures that help level up your abilities of the various different characters to win in the snowball fight, so your club doesn't lose and get eliminated as a club. And so there's relationship things that you build up, but also at the same time this kind of like D&D like storyline going on in the background too. And it's just charming. I just think it's a lovely, lovely game.
Oh man, I'm looking through this and this is so up my fucking alley. I'm definitely gonna get this on the next sale.
Oh yeah, it's definitely one
awesome.
that I can't. And another one that I really liked, which is a kind of a murder mystery tactics game that's lesbian in structure, is one called Black Closet. That's really quite lovely.
Black Closet, all right.
Yep, that's another one that it has the kind of schoolgirl, obviously Asian obsession with, school settings and all this, and school politics, but it plays out really well and has kind of those young adult themes that it is charming, including it actually has an unusual twist where it's primarily a lesbian-based story, but there's one girl whom if you flirt with and finally kind of do make the moves on, comes out as straight and is just confused as to why everybody's lesbian in this place.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which I thought was a cute inversion.
I was just looking through it on Steam, and I was like, this looks exactly like a game I played called Long Live the Queen. And it's
Long Live the
same
Queen
people.
Yeah,
I played that. I really enjoyed that. Cool. I'll add that to the wish list as well. This is the podcast where Larry gets lots of game ideas from Bill. I appreciate it. Why don't we, speaking of games, move into what we've been playing.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Oh, and one last point. I'm so sorry.
Please, don't be sorry.
Here's a weird pop quiz for you. Can you name me a major PC franchise where, and this will be a little surprising, because, some great representation has been in game, like Borderlands has in fact, Borderlands 3, the DLC Guns, Loves, and Tentacles is a gay wedding themed Lovecraftian one, which is awesome.
Lovely.
Yeah, oh my god, Hammerlock is an awesome character. And boy, did some fanboys get upset because he was cast as a black man. It's like, he's always been black. Actually, I thought originally he was Indian British, but he's black. And like, people lost their shit that in the movie adaptation he's black, so that's weird. But can you name me the franchise that is a very well-known franchise? I'll give you another hint that it's a version of it is about to be released and has been being discussed in the consciousness now, that had player characters who were main player characters. You had 4 in each game. There was a sequel. And of those 8 main player characters, 4 of them were actually black and not really very stereotyped. Or I didn't find them so, but that's up to other people to determine.
So the main cast has 8 characters and 4 of them are black.
Yes.
And it's a PC. Fuck.
And it a very popular PC series. A shooter. A shooter with zombies.
A shooting you mean like a specific zombies mode like Call of Duty?
No, a zombie
I'm not thinking
game.
those are zombie game. Left 4 Dead?
Left 4 Dead.
Oh shit, that's right.
Because Lewis, Coach, and Rochelle were all people of color.
Right.
And, they definitely had their different kind of character stereotypes. And let's face it, not all the characters in Left 4 Dead were definitely that. But, I thought Coach was a great character. I played him a lot. And then, of course, in the first one, I played Bill, because Bill...
It's that simple, isn't
representation, but definitely it's but it was just really interesting to me when I was kind of going through and looking for representation ideas. There was that. And the only other thing that I would put out is that I would love to hear feedback from your listeners, particularly anybody who's Hispanic, about how they feel about games like Tropico. You know,
Right.
Because I did see a lot of references about the complications of Far Cry, you know, in terms of Latinx representation. But Tropico is one that I don't know how, you know, because obviously dictator simulator, but also comedic, but also trying to find different ways to, I don't know how it would be seen by, you know, a person of color. This is a comic way to deal with very complicated things in a way that isn't heavy like a Papers, Please, or if it's like, oh my God, everybody's a quote unquote banana Republican. That's racist shit, you know. And I don't know the answer to that, but I just thought that would be interesting to hear from. And of course, Watch Dogs 2 had a really great.
Marcus Holloway.
Yeah, who, although the only problem with that was the infamous Ludo narrative dissonance, our favorite phrase, because he's such an awesome guy, and clearly
he's a fucking
not
pacifist. You know?
Yeah, and he's a pacifist, and then the game makes him a mass murderer.
Well,
and so
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say it's just really weird to me that that's the case.
It is, and I'm on record as being like, I fucking love that game, and I tried to play as non-lethal as possible, which is not always possible. And it's just like, this dude is not going to go around killing everybody. This doesn't make any fucking sense.
No, it's not Saints Row 3, which is an awesome game. And by the way, I just finished the remaster. That was an awesome experience.
Nice.
But definitely it's a murderous one, you know. And we can talk a little as we hit games we play. We can talk some of the representation in those where they pop up. But yeah, it's definitely there's a lot more. Obviously, I feel like that this has been very scattershot, so I apologize to your audience that I was not as well structured maybe for this conversation. But
no, I thought it was. I mean, I appreciate it so much because I learned a lot just listening. We already talked. We did a preamble. Or, you know, before we even got here, and I still have learned a lot today, so I appreciate everything you brought to the podcast.
Very kind. Well, and I just want to give one last shout out, which is to The Sims, which for a lot of gay people was the first time that you could actually see gay relationships validated. Although, you know, and my husband, who's a giant Simmer, in fact, for Pride a number of years ago, Maxis was highlighting some of the characters, and again, being biracial himself, he creates really diverse characters, and he was really excited about the possibility of creating, you know, lesbian couples and all this. And his lesbian couple, Maxis chose, who had a daughter, was chosen by Maxis as one of their featured Sims, and it's now the first or second most downloaded LGBTQ plus Sim couple. And
that's really great.
The next thing. So I'm very proud of him, and I love you, my husband, and so I'm very proud of him. And just, yeah, he loves his Sims, and that was for him. That was the announcement he was interested in, is Cottage Living, the new expansion, and he was hoping they would have magical fairies, and now they're not going to have fairies, and he's very disappointed. But amongst the gay community, currently, it is now being called as an expansion lesbian living instead of cottage living. So that is kind of charming. So
that's great. I mean, that game just offers so much. And I want, okay, so is it that Maxis or the developers or whatever just give you a blank canvas on which to paint, or are they very specific about what they offer? Like, do they offer?
Well, it's a little bit of both, because it's evolved over the Sims games. Originally, you could have partnerships, but the mood boost and other things, and it wasn't the same as marriage, but you could have those relationships. Later on, they did add in gay marriage, and in the later ones, where there's like these aspirations, the town itself is kind of almost canonically bisexual, and so the engine sometimes to create stories, random townies will kind of fall for each other, and the gender is a little less important. It doesn't really support, although there's a lot of mods, because, you know, Sims lives off of mods like a lot of games.
Right.
Like, it doesn't really represent polyamory well, although there are achievements where if you bang enough people, then people won't get mad at you for banging everybody, which is a colorful situation. But you have to kind of be a Lothario and break a lot of hearts until eventually they say, that's just how he or she is. They just sleep through everybody, So.
Right.
But it does give you the tools, but it also has its own inherent stories. But as a virtual dollhouse space where you can create all of those dreams, and again, my husband is such a better designer than I am. I'm always functional, and all my Sims are getting the highest levels. And I play one couple, and I want them to have all the careers and have the highest stats and all this. And my husband looks at me like I'm insane. I get all the furniture, so it max out their stats as they walk through the house. And he's like, "This looks like shit. What are you doing? You're insane." And he's like, and he'll have cute little minimalist houses, and he's into the design and the aesthetics and all this. And so we definitely, I love the fact that it, though, supports lots of different kinds of play and lots of different kinds of opportunities for choices for how you explore that game. So.
Yeah, I guess I should probably ask, because I've been looking sideways at that game. I already own it, but in terms of a game to play with my daughter, because she loves games where you build houses and kind of decorate a little bit, but more about the building. Like No Man's Sky, for example. Like, space exploration is cool, but she basically wants to build a space base.
Well, and if you have the engineering career, you can eventually learn to build a hobby. You can build a spaceship in your backyard and go exploring space. And there is in Sims 4. And you also have the career as an astronaut.
That's cool. Okay. I might need to, for research purposes, play this game for a while.
Oh, yeah. Well, just realize eventually you may have to explain the importance of what woohoo is. But outside of that, it's...
yeah,
two Sims love each other very much, and there's an interactable bush in the yard. So.
Well, my daughter did say the sentence today. Sperms look cool. I was like, okay, because we were reading a book called How a Baby is Made, and it talks about sperm and egg. She was like, wow, sperm looks cool. I was like, okay, yes, okay. Moving on.
That is a phrase that is a cute story at her age, and perhaps more disturbing to hear if she was a teenager.
Oh, yes, definitely. But yeah, the last week we have another book about, basically talking about sexual health with kids.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I forget exactly what it's called, like How to Talk to Kids or something like that. Like, it's a great book, but every once in a while my daughter's like, I want you to read this book to me. Okay. And she chooses based on the picture, what she wants me to read.
Okay.
And my wife is very excited about that, because a lot of it is most of it's age appropriate, and it's good to talk about consent now. When
Absolutely.
We're tickling her and she says stop, we're like, okay, it's your body, your choice. Although when she asks for a cookie and we say no, and she says my body, my choice, I get a cookie. That's not exactly how that works. We're still working on that.
Well,
but
agency is a complicated thing, and we already know that also from constitutional studies. So that's that.
Yeah, exactly. So she opened up to a page where she liked a picture, and she's like, Daddy, read this page to me. And I was like, okay. And I looked at it, and it says how to talk to your children about online pornography. I'm like, I don't think that we need this. We're not here yet. I don't think I'm going to read this to you. But yeah, it's navigating all of these spaces as a parent is super interesting. Which is nothing at all about games we've been playing.
No, so let's
those
talk
are
about
books
what
we've
have you
been
playing,
reading.
my friend.
So I've been playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition because it's summer and I'm done grading. I just have some paperwork to take care of this week. So I've just been digging into Mass Effect 1, and I was on the Citadel forever, finding all the robots to scan and trying to dig into every nook and cranny, and remembering how not fun it is to traverse the Citadel with the fast travel and whatever else, where the ambassadors are and all this shit. So I basically decided I'm out of here. I'm going into space. So I'm starting to explore different I'm headed toward. I just got Liara, actually. I just picked her
Awesome.
up, rescued
Love
her.
her.
But like scanning all the planets and getting resources and just like I don't know. I think I played Mass Effect for 10 hours and I've probably read the codex for 3 of those hours.
Yeah, there's
just
so much in there, and of course a couple of really cute tongue-in-cheek Easter eggs that are in the codex over the series, which is really neat. It's just like there's a lot of story that comes through later in Mass Effect 3 and maybe 2 in the emails, where there's a lot of story you can miss if you don't read them, but have some very interesting extra little bits. And I think playing through the series back to back to back will, you'll be getting, like later in the series, some of the emails from characters you met in the previous game. And I think having re-experienced it, when I went back and replayed the trilogy, I really felt a lot more immersed because I remembered who the fuck these people were.
Yeah, because I had played Witcher 3, and then my friend Brad was like, yeah, if you like Witcher 3, you need to play Mass Effect. I'm like, kind of like your husband. I'm like, I don't really like sci-fi, I like fantasy. He's like, shut up and play it. I'm like, all right, I will check it out. And it's like one of my favorite games of all time now. But I played things in between. And I never played the any DLC from any of the games. So I'll be experiencing Shadowbroker, for example, for the first time. But to have it all, that's my goal this summer, is just back to back to back. I've got an Airbnb rented next week, where it's just me by myself. I'm bringing my PS5, and that's all I'm doing. It's playing Mass Effect.
Awesome.
Yeah, just digging in. It's just like the update to Mass Effect 1 is just, it makes it much, much more playable. But it's mainly the story. I heard a podcast this weekend where someone was talking about, or it was like a question like, have you ever had somebody play a game in such a way that makes you like want to vomit or whatever? And the host was like, yes, a friend of mine played Mass Effect as though it were a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter or whatever. He skipped all the dialogue, just X through it all, didn't read any of it, and just got to the next action part, and he didn't like the game. I was like, the fucking dialogue is the whole game. Like, the gunplay is not the game. You skipped the best part. So I'm really enjoying just every single optional dialogue, every single person, like exploring every single option of every single dialogue. And then having read all the codex so far, seeing references to what was in the codex and understanding their storytelling, where like we're going to tell you just enough to kind of get you the information you need to move on with the story, and then allowing like the info dump to be in the codex where you can go there if you want. And that's really cool. But honestly, that's all I've been playing this week, and by myself, and then with a friend, I've been playing Overwatch, which, speaking of representation, like the meta narrative of that game that's outside of the game itself, the comics and the videos and stuff. Tracer, I think specifically, is like
and also one of the men in it too. I can't remember now. I owned the game and played it when it first came out a little bit, but I found out that even shooter Dotas and Dotas are just the atmosphere and climate and competitivity of it. I'm kind of beyond that now. So.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because this friend I'm playing with, who I've spent the bulk of my week with actually making music with. We played just to kind of like take a break. He plays with a crew, and he invited me to play with them, and they're like super fucking competitive. Like, they were like apparently talking shit about me, which I didn't even realize, the way that I was playing Mercy. And I was like, that's how they're going to be. I didn't even notice, but if that's how they're going to be, like, I don't want to make their time miserable. Yeah. Like, they started quitting the game because I wasn't doing something I was supposed to do. And I was just like, that's not my scene anymore. I play to talk and have fun. I'm not playing to be. I don't care if I win or lose. Sometimes I don't even notice if I won or lost.
And that's the thing, is that I think that people don't. And you can have fun competitiveness, but I mean, the thing is that if one of the problems with the Dota structure, which Overwatch is just the first-person shooter version of that team-based elimination or goal-type game, is that a game or round usually takes a pretty long investment of time, and the gains by the other team, if you can find one weak player on the other team, are so high that it creates this huge mechanical imbalance that makes people really unpleasant with each other if your other teammates aren't like near perfect. And the more competitive you are, the more that having those synergies becomes, important to you for winning or to being exploited, because then your play doesn't feel validated. And I can understand that from that point of view. But on the other hand, it's like, folks, it's a game, and so it's again why that, like, I enjoy PvE content, but I just don't like in MMOs. I won't PvP. I just don't have any interest in it. I'll do it occasionally to do an achievement of some sort, but I then back out almost immediately because I'm like, I don't know enough. This is an entirely different game. It feels tacked on to the experience I'm having, and I'm okay with letting other people, if they want to do a PvP, get a shooter, murder each other, be good,
Right. Yeah, have your fun. And if I'm detracting from your fun, all right, cool. I'll go have my fun somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I love the character design of Overwatch for the most
cute.
part. It is, and it's just my most played game is Team Fortress 2, of all time, and this scratches that itch so fucking hard. It's been really nice. But mainly my friend and I play and just talk music, so it's great for shooting the shit. And then with my daughter, I've been playing Paper Mario Origami King for the second time. It's just the fucking perfect game. This story-based Mario game with cool characters and adventures and and a female, somewhat protagonist. She's with you the entire game. It's kind of like a sidekick mainly, but she is basically your superpower. Like, she is a badass on her own. So that's cool. And that's kind of it. I've mainly been doing music this week, more than games. So how about you?
Oh, Lordy. Well, in the 2 years, I'm done.
Yeah, let's go back to 2019.
Yeah.
How many games you played?
So a couple of, I have quite a few, but let me see if I can. So I do have to mention that in honor of Pride, and I thought you found this incredulous, but I actually do play Injustice 2 Mobile, and I'm actually a guild leader in that. And so
I was surprised about that. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's one of those where the guild thing, I probably wouldn't still be playing such a cash grab mobile game because it's just a grind fest. But I have much sunk cost fallacy to it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there for those who didn't hear the controversy, colorfulness of it. There was a Pride Month special, and again, they have beat 'em up games, and so they'll have, hey, beat up so-and-so, and if the X number of times if the community does it, you get some bonus. And so for Pride Month, they took one of the canonically lesbian characters, Poison Ivy. Well, she's bi, really, but, or maybe pansexual since she's, also part plant, depending on which version of Poison Ivy she is.
I think in the Injustice universe, it's specifically.
She's a little complicated, in terms of it. But anyway, the idea was beat the fuck out of her a lot of times for Pride, and it's like, oh, that's deeply unfortunate,
What a fucking stepped on a
dumb
rake.
Because the thing is, as was pointed out by so many people, it would have been so easy to have some other character, and then because they already have challenges where you get rewards, where you have to have a team of very specific characters. And Poison Ivy and one of the Harley Quinns, Heartbreaker Harley Quinn, they are part of a quote-unquote synergistic team along with one of the Jokers. And these three characters have powers that enhance each other. So there have been challenges where you have to play 2 or 3 of these characters together in order to do the challenge. And so just having any Poison Ivy and any Harley fighting together against, some threat would have been very easy for them to, the coding's there already.
Right.
So it was just, again, I don't think it was malice, but it was so poorly thought out. It was kind of sad. They quickly just gave us all the rewards and then had somebody new to beat up. But it's fine. I have all the shards for them anyways. It didn't make any difference to me, but it was, I don't quite get into the thing where people get so upset that corporations suddenly decide Pride is important and then put Rainbow out on everything. Fuck me, I'll take 1/12 of the year to be people interested, in positive than not,
The thing that pisses me off about that is recently, in the past couple of weeks, reading people's comments about the rainbow flag is being shoved down my face, and it's whatever is bothering them about that. It's like heteronormativity is like shoved in everyone's face in our culture every single fucking day of the year. So get the fuck over it.
Yeah, no, it's the flip side on the gay community is a lot of people see it as over commercialization. All this, I do agree that you have to think about, you know, like for example, if Chick-fil-A had some rainbow shit, of course,
Jesus Christ,
you know, Dan Cathy can go, you know,
fuck himself.
Yes, except that it probably would violate some of his. He's much more likely to fuck other people over, you know, which has been a much more common thing for him. But, you know, outside of that, I'm okay with even, you know, because one of the things is that as a historian, I point out that, you know, originally in the late 19th century, women began to earn money outside the home. It's not that they never worked, they always worked, but, you know, were beginning to have some independent income. And then the market began to see them as independent actors and began to market to them. And even though that the marketing for women in the 19th century is incredibly grotesque for the most part, you know, like buy this cleanser, you know, because your husband is so upset and tired because your house is shitty. And now with Super Clean, right, you can, you know, ladies, it always started out with the phrase ladies, you know, do this, that, and the other. And it was basically, your life will be better if you keep the house cleaner, therefore buy this cleaning shit, you know, sort of thing.
Right.
But being seen as an economic entity is part of being recognized for eventual social and cultural, and eventual political capital. So it's
like in a capitalist society, that's like the first step.
I would argue that it's an important part of recognition. So even if it's sometimes awkward and unpleasant, it is a step that's, to me, positive to see that it exists.
Right.
So there was that. I also have been playing ESO. The new Blackwood chapter came out, which has companions, which is kind of cool. They're kind of crap, but you know, it's well, it's kind of like Skyrim companions. You know, they're they right now are. It's clearly the very early version of it. Getting faction with them isn't great. There aren't romances yet. There's only 2 of them. They have limited dialogue, so just like if you've ever had a companion that has limited dialogue, if the character Bastion one more time says, "This looks like a great place to harvest," I'm going to kick him in the nuts. But it's fine. It's a really, I like the mechanic. I like the fact it gives you a little bit of extra solo ability in a game that really is kind of like an online Skyrim with other people. Elder Scrolls has always been interesting because it does have the unusual situation that you can go to an area, and if you finish a quest line, the landscape can change depending on how you finish the quest line. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, intriguing to me, particularly because then you can be with somebody else, and even though you're in the same instance together, they can see the landscape differently if they haven't done the quest. And so like if you've pacified ghosts and the ghosts are all pacified to you now because you've laid them to rest, but for them they're still actively antagonistic, and so it's a different experience. And so it's a really interesting worldview, but it's definitely a game that's enjoyable. But you know, it's that MMO grind. Outside of those, and of course playing Borderlands with my husband, and we've been having just, you know, we haven't played as much in the last week, but you know, off and on we still play, and we're getting into some of these more in-game. We're in our second playthrough through the new Game Plus type thing, and we're definitely, you know, beginning to be a little bit more cogent of trying to get better weapons. I don't know if we'll ever do some of these arenas and all this. It's not our kind of style of play. We like the storylines, but there's some new storyline things that look kind of cool in it. So I also played some visual novels. The most recent one, which I just played a few days ago, very short but wonderful experience. Another one I'm going to suggest to your list is Overboard.
Overboard
just was released, I think, in the last week. It's a visual novel time management experience set in the 1930s. that's very
Yep, sure is.
Christie-like.
Uh-huh.
And you play a widow. Well, soon to be widow, because at the beginning of the game you murder your husband on a cruise ship.
Oh, Jesus.
And the whole gimmick of the game, and there's only like 7 other characters in the game, is a time management to get through the day and somehow get away with the murder. And this requires dealing with the various different clues that other people might find, having explanations, how you handle yourself. It's a real
80 Days. The people who made 80 Days made this game.
Yeah, no, it's a really fun little game.
I'm adding this to my cart.
It's
right now.
definitely it also has a little bit of the Groundhog Day kind of mechanics that you see in some of these games, where even though that when you start off the new game, it's a new slate, right? But the character has some awareness, and so there, like if you wake up the second time that you played through, there might be a checklist of saying, "Oh, you might, I was wondering how I might get the pass key to get into other rooms. I'm wondering how I might be, this sort of thing." And so it kind of gives you a couple of hints to ways to different pathways. And there's some, I haven't played through all of them. I got, I think, 4 or 5 different endings, and then I was kind of, this is good. I see how some of the other ones could go, but I just don't need to do all of them. But it was a fun experience. It was charming. The voice actress who does the main character is just lovely. So definitely a thumbs up on that.
Yeah, I've got it in my cart now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it where you're not the one solving the mystery, you're the one who fucking did it.
Oh, yeah, no, I love those inversions. A game I played a little bit earlier, but because it's similar, I want to mention it, is Raging Loop, which was originally, I think, on some portables and then ported to the PC. It's a visual novel that also uses the Groundhog Day sort of thing, but it's a much longer experience. It's a premium experience. So, and again, it's a Japanese game, I believe. But you are basically a character who's recently had a very uncomfortable breakup, and you end up going into the countryside, and you end up in a small rural village, and you get trapped there at a time where basically they have a ritual that appears to be basically the game of werewolf, where some of the people are actually wolves, and apparently werewolves, and some are the villagers, and they actually have to vote to hang members the next morning. But this plays it very straight. Like, what is the emotional impact of villagers who have very strong religious beliefs? But what if this game was actually being taken seriously? And it is complicated and moving. It kind of goes in different directions, and it has so many different endings. And part of it is that you have to fail a lot of times. You have to
learn
multiple times, and then there's like a flow chart of things that, and so if you see certain things, your character always remembers and re-goes through the story. But each time they experience it with the memory of the things that went wrong.
Right.
And the story changes dramatically over time, because as some characters are either there or not there or change due to your actions, and their stories and your perspective on the game changes in ways depending on these different routes. It goes a little bit off the rails at the end of some of these things do, but the experience is well worth it, and it is one that you'll have. It's a lot of conversation to have with it, So I think it's a really fun game.
And did you finish that game?
Yes, that one and there's even a further element to it, which is that if you complete it and do basically all the main endings and get to kind of the quote-unquote true ending, which I did, then that motherfucker opens up kind of like a New Game Plus, where you can go through, but then it also has under commentary where your character, stuff that wasn't revealed the first time, but now that you know the whole storyline, it actually shows the thoughts of some of the other characters you're interacting with as they meet you either the first, the second, or the third time, or whatever.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so there's it's almost like a developer's commentary, director's cut, but actually adds a whole new thing. And then there's 2 side stories, and I didn't ever get to those because it was one that I played enough of, and I said, okay, I'm gonna kind of sit on this and let it, let it just kind of sit. But it's definitely great. During finals, I was taking out my frustrations on some of my students' papers by playing Saints Row the Third Remastered.
That checks out.
Yeah, it's. I really have never gotten into Grand Theft Auto. I've tried to play it. I've tried to play Red Dead. I find the controls on the PC with keyboard and mouse just atrocious, and they're a little too gritty and dark for me. Saints Row is, although I've never played Saints Row 2, and I know that's played a little more seriously. Saints Row is so weird and funny and over the top. I just adore it. It is one where, again, your character creator can have different races. Interestingly, I think it's in Saints Row 3, one of the female characters, the voice is a Hispanic female and uses Spanish in some of the interjections in the character's language. And so it does have some interesting minority representation in there. It does have some actually, Saints Row 4. Did you ever play that one?
I haven't played any Saints Row.
Oh my god! So Saints Row
despite
3,
owning, I think, all of them.
Yeah, Saints Row 3 is insane and fun, and it does have, like it has a gang that's the luchadors and all that, But then one of your guys is an ex-luchador named Angel Perez, who's like your mentor character, who's also one of your quote-unquote homies and all this. But I mean, a number of the characters have definitely sexual fluidity. There's some very interesting characteristics behind them. Your main character is, again, it's so goofy you can't take a lot of it seriously. But Saints Row 4, so in Saints Row 3 definitely has some really weird shit going on, that begins to kind of break the laws of physics. In Saints Row 4, your gang has become so popular, you do become president, and then you are invaded by aliens, aka like ID4. And
what the hell?
Then you are basically the main game. The conceit of it is you've been captured by the aliens, and you're in a holodeck universe, and you are trying to fight your way out of it by creating all these disruptions. So it creates a very different thing. And the funny part is that after you begin to unlock the characters, you have, including David Keith, who's playing kind of like a weird version of himself, which is fun. But the thing is, it actually parodies Mass Effect and the Mass Effect romances.
Oh man, okay.
Yeah, and it's the Saints Row 3. I think it's kind of a fun one to play first, so you kind of get how over top it is. In the second game, it's literally playing superpowered, so it feels more like a Spider-Man game or a Batman game where you really feel like you're leaping buildings, and it's kind of insanity as you build your stuff. But it is it is stupid, goofy, sexy fun. This is not appropriate for your daughter ever.
Yeah,
a game where one of the primary weapons is to get a 12-inch dildo or 12-foot dildo that you could beat people to death with is definitely a different sort of thing, and you can have achievements for kicking people in the groin and then shooting them in the groin to get the achievement "Ow, my nuts," I believe is.
Okay, so yeah, play that by myself.
Yeah, it's funny. It's way over the top, but it's not. It's like the Yakuza games, in that regard. So
yeah,
you can't.
Right.
It's really not meant to be a very serious thing.
There's a nice time for that too, because as you mentioned, I get stuck with Red Dead or even GTA specifically with just how oppressive I feel like the setting is, how dark it is.
The setting, the storyline, and the main characters are not likable. And I know that one of the main characters of GTA 5 is bisexual, but I mean, just not a likable character. So it's like, well, there it is. Let's see. I don't want to take up all the time, but real quickly, I also played through a visual novel called Chess of Blades, which was one by Argent Games that has put out a lot of stuff. I believe in my previous thing 2 years ago, they have a free one called My Dry Delight, which is gay male romance novel that's set in Seattle during Prohibition. It's a quick, short, little fun experience. Chess of Blades is kind of like Game of Thrones, 18th century, but more 17th century French court kind of stuff in a fantasy kingdom.
Oh my god, you just said all the buzzwords that I need.
Yeah.
Is it Chess of Games?
Chess of Blades.
Okay.
And it's got a really good art style. And then you have, again, some romanceable characters. I managed to, because, again, I was trying to spread myself a little too thin. I managed to do the one thing that the negative of the game is the choices at the very beginning. You don't have a lot of real choices. The important choices kind of come later. But in the first playthrough, I managed to do a route that ended the game prematurely and got me killed very early. And I don't know how it was that, because I thought I was being clever by trying to play people off of each other. But there's kind of a crucial moment where if you haven't at least got somebody kind of more heavily aligned towards you, then nobody will be with you when a bad event happens.
Right.
And so there it is. There's 4 main, it's all gay romance. But the only negative is that the main character is a little whiny, and I was like, I wish that he was a little better, but it's, but it does play kind of like the bored, spoiled aristocrat who's the kid of somebody who was like a grand strategic character in the court. And now people are putting a lot of expectations on him, and he basically wants everybody to just kind of fuck off.
Right.
It deals with, there are some elements that suggest lack of consent, but if you play it a little longer, it makes a little bit more sense. But it definitely can feel creepy, but it's intended to in certain ways. But again, I'm making Game of Thrones type references, so lack of consent in court politics, I'm sure you've never seen that before.
Oh, definitely not in Game of Thrones at all.
Yeah,
no.
that's also in the Pride Month, I'll mention, and I'll try and stop with this, is Blush, which is, and this is one of those games that I recommend with incredible qualifications. So this is an idle clicker game, dating game, and is clearly meant to be a cash grab. Okay. It's free, but with a lot of pay-to-win kind of elements to it. And it has this sort of thing where the time dilates. So this is an example where I'll cheat because on the PC, unlike on the mobile or whatnot, I can go into offline mode and set my clock back 5 months. And then fuck you, and it's going to be 300 days before I get my next level of whatever. So,
Right.
But the thing that's amazing is if you play it and you seem like you think you're going to enjoy it, it has the weirdest setup, which feels almost a little furry thing as well. This is actually like the gay male version of another game that they put out called Blush, which was all about women. But in this one, you're a primary character and you can kind of customize yourself, but you look like a fucking marshmallow. So I don't even know what that's. And in fact, later on, they refer to you by Marshmallow. And then and then with this game, you you're at a zoo and you're rushed, and then you accidentally feed people some bad water, and it basically turns them into various different talking manimal type things. And then it ends up that the only way that you can break the curse on all these people you accidentally turn is to date them. And then,
oh yeah, of course,
if you have a kiss or various things, it slowly transitions them towards more human. Now, this is silly and weird in the extreme, but they have a lot of interesting characters. If you're willing, if you try it and you like it and some of the idle clicker clicks with you, drop the money for some of the DLC and unlock the voice acting. The voice acting is really quite charming. They actually put a lot into the voice acting, and there's a lot of voice actors because there's I think now 20 guys you can date, and I think that the whole voice acting package is $2 or $3. So, it also has a weird thing that in between it has phone stories where you'll get texted by various different people as you unlock other steps, and they're like friends or other things, and then there's romances there. Now, this is not a PG game. And even if you don't unlock the uncensored, which definitely, let's say that you would be definitely having to have that conversation with your daughter on that chapter on pornography online, because it is. There are moments that definitely should that to quote your daughter, oh, that looks cute. But it's I'm sorry, that felt really weirdly inappropriate as I said. I'm so sorry. That felt awkward. That was not what I meant it to be funny, and that just came out really gross. I'm sorry. Anyway, there's peni. I'll put it that way. All right. And there's just
I suspected that.
But if you do the unlock stuff. But some of the characters are really charming. Now, some are kind of dumb, and it also is infamous or famous because one of the characters they based on Markiplier. And there is a famous YouTube video where he finds out about this and goes into the game to date himself. And then gets mad because he has to spend money to date himself. And it's I don't know a lot of Markiplier's work. I know him mostly because I've seen Matt Pat's videos. But it's a funny little game. But the thing is, it definitely has a lot more to it than it appears. It appeals to geeks. Like some of the characters are takeoffs of the Terminator. There's one that's a takeoff of Doctor Who. I think it's a mostly female-created game. It's a smaller studio, but they know their geek audience. There's one of the main characters is a dragon who's clearly kind of an Assassin's Creed parody. One of the DLC characters, Cole, is a almost Hannibal Lecter-like character who's supposedly a detective, but is clearly seducing you. It also has a weird one because it has a little static portraits on the left that you click on the characters, and his is the only one that after you make him human again, he gives you like fucking crazy eyes sometimes. And the voice acting cast has done other voice acting and other real things, so it's kind of it's kind of weird to see this high quality yet really cheeseball game be out there. But definitely, if you like it, buy some of the DLC. Some of the characters will make this game a lot less pain in the ass, and feel free to cheat, but the devs keep adding to it, and it's strange. And if nothing else, look at the Markiplier video, because it's watching him go do his over the top thing is really interesting. So I'll leave it there. I get to do one more podcast, so I'm sure I have other games in the last 2 years I didn't mention. And so since I'm going to be on vacation, starting in a few days, seeing my parents for the first time, my mom for the first time in almost 2 years, because she has Parkinson's and is elderly and has issues. And during the pandemic, that wasn't possible for me to be back home.
Right.
I will actually be home basically until the Saturday before filming, so I will have to rely on my previous game, since I think that I will not be doing a lot of gaming with my mom, except she wants to go back and play some real-life Gin Rummy. So
we can talk about tabletop games. I will fill the void, and next week I will try to play quite a few games because my schedule has mysteriously opened up.
Yeah, well, don't worry. I hear there's a colleague that might even have to still have something that's in one of your specialty departments sent to you sometime over the summer, but since he may or may not have an active dean, that it may be easier to slip it.
Oh my God, yeah, that sounds great. Yes, that issue you mentioned is fun.
Oh,
to
it's
deal with.
Colorful. Anyway, so with that, we have managed to hopefully escape the 2.5 hour mark. I have managed to now lose all of your subscribers, so I'm very proud of that.
I think we've added some. Thank you so much for coming today, Bill. This is a really great discussion. If you like our podcast, please rate us on your podcast service of choice, and tell a friend, tell a couple friends, and we will see you next week. Bill will be here, and we'll be talking about some more fun gaming news and wrapping up E3, which has got a couple days left. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Oh, and don't forget that Larry has promised I get to get a soapbox to tell him everything he got wrong. So stay tuned for the Confrontation podcast.
That is a good cliffhanger. Thank you. All right, folks. See you later.